Okay, we're live.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live panel chat. We're going to be talking about compassion and forgiveness today. But before we get started, I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves, share where they're located, and share something that feels new to you in the moment. Kay, can we kick off with you?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm Kay Eck, and I'm coming to you from Sedona, Arizona, excuse me. And something that feels new to me is I feel like there are new levels of our ability to connect with source that it feels like, I used to feel like there was like this dome over my head, and it was something that I couldn't break through. Now it feels like it's starting to shed, and that connection is just growing stronger. So it's super exciting.
Wow. That is exciting. Thank you. Um, Ashley, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Phoenix Cologne, and I am located in the Sedona area as well. And what's new for me in this moment, it's actually this flower. So I had these flowers that were brought to me earlier this week, and I've been waiting very patiently for them to open. And today was the first day that one of them opened really beautifully. And so I felt like I wanted it to be here. And so it's bringing me a lot of joy in this moment.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Megan?
Hi there. This is Megan. I'm coming through from Batavia, Illinois. It's 9 o'clock. It's nice and dark, and I'm in bed and it's cozy. So it's very new to me on a generic level. It's very new to me to be up at 9 p.m. doing something. Um, but on a larger scope, what's new to me right now is just that. It's rebirth. It's what's new. It's spring is in the air. It's transition in my life. It's I'm an Aries, so that first zodiac sign is about to start, and I feel for me like it's new year at this time. So right now I'm just I think on a deep dive, kind of resonating into the season and the transition.
Excellent. Thank you. And Leela?
Hi, my name is Leela Hutchison, and I'm coming from Sonoma, California. And something that's new to me, there's many things, but I'll make it personal today. I actually went for a hike to a new place that I have never been before. And it was so exquisite with everything so green and all of these wildflowers popping up, and a creek that I'd never really discovered before. So it was a lot of wonderful water rushing over rocks and ferns and redwoods and vineyards, and blue sky with puffy white clouds. We've had a lot of rain, so that was what was new to me today, was exploring and discovering a new hiking trail.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Leela. My name is Cerise. I'm from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here. Thanks to the change of time, it's a little bit later now. And what's new to me in this moment is I have a new journal. And so I get really excited when I get a new journal, and can't wait to write in it every day. And I don't know, there's something special about the newness of a new journal. So that's exciting for me. So I want to kick us off in this panel discussion, again, it's about compassion and forgiveness. And what happens, with some of these terms is that everyone has different definitions. So I'd like us to start, and have each of our panelists answer, what compassion means to them and how would you define compassion? So if we could start with Ashley.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. For me, compassion feels like there's an action to it. It feels like there's something to do, like a momentum to it, sympathy, empathy. There's a lot of really beautiful emotions that can exist, but when I think of compassion, it feels like that might look like being a compassionate witness where you're actively listening to what someone might be going through. Compassion could be co-creating with a loved one, a potential solution to whatever it is that they're experiencing, in the suffering. Action might actually just be like just being there, but in an active way. And so that's for me how I experience compassion in my life, is it feels like a conscious action that's being taken.
Wow. Thank you. Kay, could you share with us your definition of compassion?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this, I think that probably most of us came to an understanding of compassion through the sympathy route. And I thought that they were interchangeable until I read something or heard something, and it was that sympathy can be quite disempowering, and it also isn't necessarily respectful of someone's path. So when I think about compassion now, the way that I describe it, I don't know if I have like a definition, but the way I describe it is that for me, it's often becoming a silent witness to whatever somebody might be going through. And sometimes it's soft and sometimes it's fierce, but it's always, like Ashley said, it always involves listening and openness and holding space for whatever the experience is that's coming through for another individual. So that's how I would.
Gosh, I love how both of you are describing, what compassion means to you. Because, earlier today I was looking up, what the dictionary's definitions of these words are, and they're just so cold. And you both have added so much warmth and feeling to your definitions and made it really personal too. Megan, how about you? Can you share with us how you would define compassion?
Yeah, I agree with what has been said, and if I were to define it, I think I'd use similar phrases and wording that Kay and Ashley have already used, but in particular, it is that it's an action. Um and for me, it's I think I think the most challenging part about defining it is that there's so many emotions that that are coming through simultaneously when you are engaged in a moment of compassion, because there's typically suffering, and whether that suffering is minuscule or that suffering is immense, that's what's happening. Is it might begin as a moment of empathy where you see someone's suffering or some being's suffering, some situation of suffering as a reflection, and the ego wants to react based on how, what my experience is, the projection, the reflection. But ultimately, compassion is that force that turns it around and says, I want to be here and do something about the suffering that I'm seeing. It's not about me. And the way that I engage compassion is by letting myself go, even though that emotion and that empathy and that sympathy might be what sort of sparked the compassion in the first place. Compassion has this incredible function of softening what your own suffering is and actually extending help and a hand and a witness or whatever expression it becomes to the suffering that isn't you. And that's what makes it a miracle. Compassion.
Wow. So profound. Thank you for sharing. And I love hearing everyone's different interpretations. There are some overlaps, yet, different takes on your experiences with compassion. Leela, how about you? Can you share with us your definition of compassion?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this today, I was thinking of what immediately I wrote out was, this is a feeling attribute of my heart chakra. It takes the quality of an action that extends out towards gentleness and kindness. And it is extended to all beings. I was thinking about somebody we know that might be suffering, but it's towards everything, animals, insects, birds, whatever the experience is in my reality. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Leela. I was, as I was thinking too of, I went straight to my heart chakra as well when I was thinking of, how I would define compassion, and also combining the action of helping to alleviate, pain, struggle, suffering of others, and being in that together. But definitely for me, it was about starting with the heart. So thank you all for setting the groundwork for, this conversation now. We'll go into some more questions about compassion, and then we'll shift gears and go into forgiveness and follow the same type of format when we get to forgiveness and asking everyone to share their definitions of it. But let's continue with compassion. So Ashley, can you share what you perceive the difference? You've heard in everyone's definition, different words. We've talked about empathy and sympathy. Can you share what you see as the differences between compassion, empathy, sympathy?
Thank you. Yes, I actually agree completely with what Megan shared. She kind of touched upon the differences between them. And the way that I experience it personally is sympathy when in a healthy form, because I do think that there's shadows of these emotions. But I would say sympathy in its healthiest, clearest space is when you're telling someone, I can feel like that must be difficult. That there's like a feeling of like, wow, that must be really difficult what you're going through. And I think that there's a space of acknowledgement that suffering is happening, and that acknowledgement can be the spark of something much deeper should that person explore that a little bit further. I think the shadow is that there can be a little bit of a detachment from the other person in the way that you're experiencing sympathy. And for me, empathy feels like, to me, it feels like, wow, I've felt that before. And it has this ability to kind of take the focus away from the individual who's experiencing something profound in their life that's calling out for reconciliation or is calling out for love. And I feel like the shadow of that is that spotlight on you and how you're feeling. And at the same time, there is a spark of consciousness that is there that if that person chose to explore it a little bit deeper, it could potentially evolve into something quite beautiful. It's like the start of something. And for me, like as we shared, like compassion, to me, it feels like an action. It's taking these other emotions and alchemizing it into like a deeper experience where you're not necessarily attaching to the suffering, but you're actually consciously looking for a divine solution or seeking out prayer or breath or space, whatever that particular moment is calling for. So that's my experience of those.
Wow. Yes. Thank you. They're very related and often also can be confused in conversations when people are talking about, empathy and compassion. Definitely related, but as you shared, there are differences. Kay, can you share with us, when did you first begin to apply the practice of compassion to others?
Well, I mean, I would like to think I've been doing it all along. But like I said earlier, and what Ashley has been talking about is that I probably, when I was younger, had them a little bit mixed up and didn't quite understand the difference between them. So I think that the commonality is the heart. It's the intention of being there for someone, of being in company with them and accompanying them on whatever journey it's on. And I think that we all have that. We all have the masterful spark when we're children. Like we know exactly what to do on the playground because you see that somebody has fallen down and you're going to go help them up and help dust them off and put a little smile on their face, but you're not trying to fix anything for them and you're not really aware that it's you on the ground. So like you have that sort of built-in perfection that children have in so many areas of their life. So I think I probably was a very sensitive and compassionate child. I think that drove a lot of my behavior up until the point where I, it's like Megan said, like my ego started getting involved. And I think as a parent also, you have a tendency to want to fix things for people. And when they're especially for your children, and when they're going through something, it's like it's devastating to you. And walking that line between compassion and codependency as a parent is really, really tricky. And you can fall off, some very steep cliffs with that. So I think it's been an ongoing practice, but I do feel that I've become more masterful with it as I've been able to understand my own traumas and egoic responses and, kind of where those fixing tendencies come from, then I'm becoming a little bit better at it too. But it is also, it's very much dependent on the person who's receiving the compassion because it might mean something different for them. So some people just want to be heard. Some people want you to speak out and tell them if you've been through something like that. And I think just being a really good listener for the cues and knowing someone is super helpful in those conditions.
So you shared with us about applying the practice of compassion to others. How about applying it to yourself?
Yeah, that's been a journey as well. Because when you start to realize that your life is your responsibility, not necessarily your fault, but it is your responsibility, then I certainly had a period where I was not very compassionate with myself because I had created this mess and that mess, and maybe that relationship wasn't what it should have been, or and I started to blame myself for those things. And the only way for me to heal those things was by having compassion for myself, that this is a human experience that is profoundly challenging, and that compassion is our birthright. Like, we have the capacity to give ourselves the compassion, and we deserve it.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, Megan, if I can ask you, what does compassion bring you when practiced with others and yourself?
I think even if you set out to purposely be compassionate, even if you're working on being a more compassionate person, so you're literally trying to be compassionate, I think that one of the quickest results is a sense of purpose can come along with this. So oftentimes, even though we don't want to wrap our identity into it too intricately and allow it to become our identity, this purpose, a sense of purpose. I mean, anyone will say, go volunteer and see how you feel after that. Volunteer, for a cause that's near and dear to you, and you'll feel this strong sense of purpose. And oftentimes, if you're working with beings in this volunteer capacity, you'll experience compassion. And so a sense of purpose. But it's humanity. It's I once read something that was really powerful to me, and it said that even the unhealthiest person, during a state of compassion, during an act of compassion, their vitals will read far improved than when they're in their state of illness, right? And someone who is well will have exemplary, almost superhuman vital readings during acts of compassion. It is actually healthy for us. So I also believe that we feel the sense of our humanity, but almost in a superhuman way, like, wow, this is living, like, wow, this, even though we're amidst a suffering, we're also feeling extremely invigorated in a way, because it's really vitalizing us to be in this act of compassion. So not only is the result having been there for someone, being a great person, doing the work, showing up, but there are actually some health benefits, and this idea that you have a purpose in this. And that purpose is resulting in something that's ultimately good for humanity. So.
Wow. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Leela, my question for you is compassion a requirement?
No, I thought about this question, and I'm not sure where it's sourced from, whether Kate came up with this one, or I just need a little clarification of context, because a requirement for what? In what kind of context are we talking about? So I've got my answer, but it's not based on a requirement. It's not compassion. No, it's not a requirement for being human. But I don't think that's really what the question was about. So if there can be, somebody can clarify that, I can answer it much better.
The way I interpreted the question is similar to how you're answering it. It's, is it necessary? Like, is it a requirement for humanity? Is it a requirement, in being human?
Okay, well, I can go with that. So if we're a we come from, and it's my belief that we're multidimensional, and that we're actually having a human experience, that we're spirits in a human body having this experience. So what's the whole purpose of this? So the compassion is a requirement of understanding what it is to be human, fully human. And that it's probably one of the reasons why we came to Earth into this school, to learn this very act, this very important act. Thank you.
No, thank you. Kay, did you have anything to add to the question of whether compassion is a requirement?
Yeah, I apologize for the somewhat vague question. But I think what I was getting to, I love that little path that Leela took there. I was kind of thinking like, is compassion necessary for our own development? And I think I've come to realize in this lifetime that we have people have varying growth plans in this time around. Some of us are on an accelerated journey. Some of us are on a little slower path. I think that it's inevitable that everybody grows. So I think I was trying to get at the idea of compassion as being one of those guideposts that all of us must hit in order to embody the greatest version of ourselves. And in that regard, I think that probably it is, because it's necessary for that stage of development where we come to understand that we are one living unit, one living expression of the divine, and that people have chosen wildly different experiences within that. And that all of those experiences are holy, all of them are divine, and all of them deserve our attention, our compassion, and ultimately our honor. So yeah, I think that's what I was getting at.
Then I wholeheartedly agree. Exactly.
Me too. So Kay, while we're here, what keeps you from practicing compassion when the situation may warrant it?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that it's also a common experience that we're exposed to people that we feel do not deserve our compassion because they've been willfully horrible. But I think that's also something that we have to come to terms with, that we, being able to offer someone compassion in when they're at their worst is also part of that growth toward unity consciousness and Christed consciousness. So I started thinking of people who maybe don't behave the way we would like them to, or are causing great harm to other people, as it's just distance from the light. They're just, the further away from the light that you are, the more confused one becomes, the more the denser the energies, the little, there's no light, there's no understanding, there's no compassion. So I think that for me, expressing compassion when it's like the worst type of behavior you can think of is a point on that path. And I can remember saying when Donald Trump first became president, I was like, God bless him, because I would not want that job. I would not want that much venom and criticism and stuff coming at me. And I think it serves a purpose in the whole, but I wouldn't have wanted to sign up for that job. So you get my compassion for that.
Thank you. So on that same track, I I'm going to ask Leela, Ashley, and Megan to share with me, how has your practice of compassion evolved? Leela, if you could kick us off.
Sure, I'd love to. So I would say for most of my life, when I was embracing the concept and the action of compassion, it was towards everyone else. I really didn't put myself into the equation. I didn't think I deserved to be there. I wasn't taught that it was about me and having compassion towards myself. So I would say in the last few years that there's been such an awakening for me of showing compassion towards myself that I had never. I mean, I would hear things like, oh, be tender, be gentle with yourself. And I'd go, yeah, okay. But I didn't really understand what it meant to really sit and look at myself as just as equal as anyone else, being human, and all the suffering that we go through being human. And I was suffering too, so much. And so that's when I started to learn the concept and the action of compassion for myself. And it's changed. It's changed me, because the more compassion that I've shown myself is equal to how much compassion I can show others. That's
Well,
it.
thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for your share.
Thanks.
Ashley, how has your practice of compassion evolved?
Very similar actually to Leela. It was very easy for me to have compassion for others, and not extend that same compassion to myself. And a very dear friend of mine, when I was in the depths of despair at a particular moment in my journey of being human, I think I was in my early 20s. We're on the phone and I'm in a very, very dark place and I'm really in the thick of suffering. And she said to me, we're about to get off the phone, and she said to me, can you do me a favor? And I was like, absolutely, because she had just listened to me for quite some time with whatever it was that I was going through. And she was like, could you just take care of my friend Ashley? Like, she really just needs your love and support right now. And it still gets me, because I had never thought about it in that way before, as how much I would be willing to do almost anything for somebody else. And yet I couldn't extend that to my own feelings of despair, etc. And I think that was the first spark of a deep collective love that just completely washed over me. And it started to help me start to see compassion for myself. And that has also, just like Leela had shared, had kind of opened up a path to find even more compassion for others. And so that's been my experience of how it's evolved.
A wise friend that you had there.
A blessing for sure.
Megan, how about you? How's your practice of compassion evolved?
A little bit like a roller coaster is how I would describe it. I mean, really just based on what life is throwing at me. I have had very different pockets of compassion. Growing up as a child, I think I was just intuitively compassionate towards, little buggers, animals. The vegan was forthcoming. It was brewing, I was just like, it was just there, right? It was just natural. But I was a child, so you're not positioned as much to take these great, feats of compassion to express these huge actions. It's more like you're a good like you're the person that gets the comment on their report card, like Megan's such a good friend, like to others. And that's how it kind of played out, I think, when I was young. But then I very purposely was pulled towards like service work, like for 15 years in my as I was becoming an adult. So as a young adult, I worked with the homeless. My work, I was drawn to service work and compassion work. And I never really realized that it was more just like this thing I couldn't not do. I had to go advocate for homeless, and that became my work. And again, it gave me purpose, and I didn't mean for it to give me purpose, but it did. So it drove me. And then I think, much like Leela and the others, you start to become forgotten, right? You empty your well, now you got to refill it. So then I was, through my yogic path and sort of the transition out of traditional faith-based spirituality into a more eclectic, wild child version of spirituality, yoga, etc. I learned self-compassion, and it was very natural for me. I've struggled less with that in life, and more of my struggle with compassion started tenfold when I wasn't giving to others. So then I'm like putting myself in check. I do need to be more compassionate to myself. And now it's like I said, the roller coaster. It's really what's going on with my mother? What's going on with my son? What's going on in my immediate circle? Like my compassion has been expressed in a very small nucleus these days, and I'm completely satisfied with that. So the evolution is just that it's evolved right along with my life cycle. Whatever is thrown at me to be compassionate towards, I just am. I don't know.
It's beautiful. No, thank you for sharing your roller coaster ride. That didn't sound so much like it was too turbulent. It sounded really like a beautiful journey that you are on with compassion. So thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, moving from compassion to forgiveness. Leela, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, what forgiveness means to them, and if you could kick us off, Leela.
Thank you. Well, this is when I think about sleeping well at night and having a clear conscience, and bringing peace into my heart, this forgiveness piece is been really, really big for me. For many years, I've had friends say, "Oh, you're so, what's the word? You just look at peace. What is that for you?" And I said, I think the real key to life is forgiving yourself and forgiving others. And that's what it means to me. It means that it brings peace. And I really think it's the ticket. It's the way and the life for our ascension. I think we have to have it because, and then I looked at it deeper and realized that, we're really, all of us are innocent. We're not just born innocent. We were made perfect in Sophia, Source, God's image. So having this experience, again, this compassion, this piece of forgiveness is in this human body. The imperfections come through making wrong decisions, and they're to be forgiven because at the core of it, we're innocent. So that's how I feel. I feel like the only way we're going to get through this and really create a golden age of miracles and heaven on earth is this forgiveness piece. That way we can come together in more harmony and joy and letting things go. So that's it.
I just felt your words go right through my body and I got the chills. It was so beautiful and touched me. Thank you.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you, Cerise.
Um, Megan, how would you define forgiveness? What does forgiveness mean to you?
Um, Forgiveness to me means if I am the one forgiving, it means that there's been some radical authenticity. There's been some radical truth bomb that's taken place. There's been some revelation of some sort. There's been some immense clarity that has taken place, because when we are sort of existing or hovering in the space where we're not in forgiveness, where there's whatever emotion is going on, a rage or a resentment or whatever's going on, where I'm feeling challenged to forgive, I'm probably skewing the reality a little bit of what's really going on here, right? Like, if I'm in a state where I can't forgive someone, I've clearly got some sort of veil in front of between me and the person or the situation that's unforgivable. And so for me, because I could go off, for another 20 minutes and talk about what forgiveness means, but I'll just keep it very simple for this panel's purpose. Is forgiveness to me means there is a radical state of authenticity, of truth, of clarity that you're dealing within.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Thank you. Kay, how about you? How would you define forgiveness, or what does forgiveness mean to you?
Yeah, I love what Megan said. That's really, really awesome. I think that like everything else for me, it's been an evolving understanding, and I seem to have a really strong ability to forgive the macro, and I have a pretty good ability to forgive, in my world. And then the hardest part for me is self-forgiveness, because I have a perfectionist streak, and I hold myself to a high standard. And I think what's behind that is that I really had this relationship with God where I had to, measure up. And I always felt like I was falling short. So learning to, and I still have problems with it. I still see how it like sneaks its way into my life in various ways. But I have found that if I'm able to forgive myself, then it's almost as if forgiving other people is irrelevant. Like there's no question that we're all forgiven. Like if I can forgive myself, like everybody else is automatically forgiven. And so I think that is a testament to how the inner work that we do on ourselves affects everything and affects our perspective toward everything. So I think that forgiveness is, I also have kind of gone through this evolution with forgiveness, in that if the love of God is unconditional, there really isn't any forgiveness, because it's whatever you've done, it's not really, it doesn't even register. It's just experience and your perfection, and that's it. So I don't think this is like a carte blanche to be, horrible, but yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I think forgiveness is really interesting.
I definitely agree with you there. Ashley, how about you? What does forgiveness mean to you?
Oh man. So for me, and this is a process, so this is not something that I am in mastery of, but when I really feel into it, to me, forgiveness is letting go of the tight grip that we have on a past that didn't happen the way we felt it should have. So whether that is someone causing harm or us causing harm to someone else, it's us staying in this nostalgic pattern of like reliving the past over and over again, trying to force a different experience. And so for me, if I can let go of that tight grip of what I felt should have happened, and I can seek the present moment, then I feel like I can find, I don't want to say it's a neutrality, but maybe it is. It's like it's a neutrality, or it's a stillness. You know, I think Megan described it as this like radical, authentic moment. I feel like I can get there when I'm not holding so tightly to the past. And for me, that's where the alchemy lives, and how forgiveness is a step into love, into the innocence that we are, into the perfection that exists. It's letting go of what we think, you know, or feel should have happened. So that's my best way of describing it. Doesn't mean it's easy. It's just, it's something I'm that's how I feel. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. Um, so when I was thinking about forgiveness as well for myself, I agree with you, Ashley. It's something I'm still working on, and I do at times struggle with it. I have a stubborn streak. My husband would laugh if he heard me say this, because I'm very stubborn, and it's something that I am definitely working on. And so, you know, forgiveness is something that I've had to work on, but similar to what Megan and what Kay were sharing, in their definitions, you know, it is great for me because I can see where my triggers are and the work that I need to do. So, and what Leela shared, you know, about, you know, how necessary it is for ascension just, you know, resonates with me as well. So I love hearing everyone's take on what forgiveness means to them. So thank you all for sharing. Kay, can you share more details about the evolution of your forgiveness practice?
Oh, wow. I think that, I mean, I feel myself getting really emotional about it now. It's, I think that one of the hardest things to do is to ask for forgiveness. That feels like a whole nother aspect of forgiveness that, it's not just about forgiving others, it's owning up to when you need forgiveness. And that seems to me to be just as critical to the program as being able to forgive. So I think that I find myself probably more concerned with forgiving myself and asking forgiveness from others than I am engaged with the act of forgiving others, because I have such a huge sense of compassion for the human journey that I just don't encounter many situations where I'm holding somebody in a space of not being able to forgive them. It does happen, but it takes a while usually. So yeah, that's kind of how my forgiveness practice is evolving right now.
Thank you for sharing. Ashley, can you share with us how you forgive?
Ooh, How I forgive. Before I get into that, I do have to share this one story that is about me asking someone else for forgiveness. I had done something not so great in high school, and I ruminated about it for years. And then I finally got in contact with the individual that I had caused harm. And they happened to be a philosophy major in college. And I reached out and I poured my heart out with this massive apology. And they reached back out to me and they gave me this metaphor of these two monks walking down a path where it was raining heavily. And they had both taken vows to never touch a woman, never engage with a woman. And there was a woman that was standing at the river that was in great distress because her children were on the other side. And so without question, one of the monks picked her up because they were stronger and more capable to cross the river, set her down, and continued their walk for miles and miles. And after some time, the other monk turned to the one who had touched the woman and said, "How dare you? You broke your vows. Like, you're going to have to leave our monastery. Like, you're going to have to make amends. You're going to need to ask for forgiveness." And the monk who had carried the woman turned to him and said, "I left her at the river. Why are you still carrying her?" And it made a big impact, of how we work with forgiveness and how we're able to say, and I'm sort of going to answer a question that you are asking later, because I feel like they're similar, which is, I honestly have used the mantra, like, I'm sorry, I forgot, forgive me. I forgot that I am a child of God. I forgot that I am perfect in form and that I'm in this human experience doing the very best I can. And that's how I forgive. And what I do my best to do, although it's imperfect, is to apply that same thing to others. Like, could there have just been a moment of forgetting the truth of who we really are? And it's just I'm sorry, I forgot. And then I do my best to move forward. And so leaving that kind of, I love, when you think of Kuan Yin, for example, and this like ocean of compassion and this karuna compassion, I think of that metaphor of the two monks at the river. Like, can we just leave it at the river and like move forward?
Thank you, Ashley. That's a beautiful, thank you for sharing the story as well in answering your question. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, and there are two last questions that I really want to make sure that we get to in today's conversation. And so, Megan, for you, is anything unforgivable?
No. So that's the answer for everyone. The answer for everyone. Everything's forgivable. But forgiveness is a very personal and interpersonal exchange typically. So I this is an incredibly difficult question when it comes to acts of violence, of incredible violence, right? Is this forgivable? My answer is yes. My answer is always going to be yes. But the forgiveness journey is going to look like a very different path, pending what we're forgiving here. And what comes into play is clearly, clearly the human psyche, clearly, who are the players, right? What level of resilience are we dealing with in regards to the players? But in that very generic sense, no, nothing is unforgivable. And I think one of the key tools that we use I have a person I have two people right now in my life who are in prison, and one of them did something which many people in our society would absolutely deem unforgivable. That is why our law system in not only some of our own states, but worldwide, allow for capital punishment. This is an expression of the unforgivable, right, in the eyes of the law. And I don't agree with capital punishment. I'm not going to open that whole big can of worms. That's a huge rabbit hole. But that's because for me, I do believe that everything is forgivable. And there's not enough time in the day to keep going with it. But let me come back. Sorry, I digress. I have these two folks in my life that are in prison, and what I've done is I've used the forgetting as the tool, the forgetting part. I don't need to remember. I don't need to constantly revisit what you did to get in prison, what you did wrong, what the bad thing was, what the illegal thing was, maybe the violent thing. If I can detach myself from an action that I myself didn't even take, right? In this instance, they did something to end up in prison and hurt many, many people in the process. It's completely forgivable to me because I'm able to detach from it. I can't identify them based on that one thing that's lingering there that needs forgiveness. If we just remove that, we're in a state of compassion and humanity.
Thank you. And I want to go there a little bit deeper in a minute. I'm just going to go to one more question, and then I want to circle back on linking compassion and forgiveness. So thank you for touching on that with your response. Leela, what's the relationship between forgiving and forgetting?
It cleans the slate.
Yes, it does. Anything else that you wanted to share on the relationship?
Well, this always goes from the micro to the macro, right? Myself to others, the others to self. It allows us to be present for the moment and suspend judgment, criticism, condemnation, maybe even thoughts of some revenge if there's some victimness involved. So it cleans the slate to be present in the moment. In the reality with somebody else, or maybe the person that you feel that's been the perpetrator of something against you. It goes deep, but I think that would say it enough for me.
Thank you. And thank you for expanding a bit. So before we close this evening's panel discussion, just wanted to see if anyone had anything else that they wanted to share, any thoughts, any comments, or comments on what anybody else said, or touch upon, like we were talking about with Megan, the interrelationship between compassion and forgiveness, and, how much is compassion needed in forgiving others or forgiving ourselves. So just wanted to check in and see if there are any other comments. Leela?
I do have one. I was thinking about compassion. And in times past in my life, I realized what I was looking, I never gave compassion to myself. And the only source I would get it from is if I would call a good friend with a meltdown or a family member and have some trauma, and I would be seeking that compassion from them. And it didn't always come forward. So that was the, speaking about like what Kay was saying, that this evolving compassion towards myself is not seeking it from others. And I really didn't know how to go about it. I didn't understand it, because I just thought the way you did it is you called your family and your friends and you would tell them these horrible things that have happened to you, and you hope that they would soothe you, or, you know, maybe feel sorry for you, or I don't know, show some kind of love. But I never thought about giving that compassion towards myself. I just never thought it was allowed. Anyway, that's what I was thinking earlier about that, where that was sourcing from, and thinking about, there's probably a lot of people thinking, how do I receive compassion? And not ever thinking that we can give it to ourselves, but that we have to get it from someone else.
And that's why we're having these conversations, right? We're having
Yes.
them to raise awareness, to bring these conversations to broader audiences. So hopefully people will start thinking about the compassion that they have for themselves as well.
I
Thank
agree.
you for sharing that, Kay.
I just want to add on the subject of forgiveness that I think it's, you know, it's easy for us to assume that there's a line that we would never cross, and therefore people who do cross that line maybe are not forgivable. And I had to come to the place where, you know, as a human with free will, I don't know what I'm capable. I don't know what I'm fully capable of. I would love to believe that, you know, that I'm always going to make the right choice, but that might not be true. And I realize that because I do have free will, I am capable of any of the worst atrocities. And I had to get to that point in order to understand that I would not want to live in a world where things were unforgivable. That to me seems like the worst place to be. That sounds like hell to me. And so, you know, I just made this video about our experience as a clean slate, because, you know, I have this understanding that in the eyes of God, like nothing, you know, the only thing that is seen in any one moment is your perfection, not what you've done, not what you've not done, not what you've said, not what you've not, you know, all the things. So yeah, that's why I just wanted to add that about, it's like unconditional forgiveness is the same thing as unconditional love.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Megan, Ashley, do either of you have anything else to add?
I'll just quickly add a thought that I had that sort of differentiates this like empathy from sympathy from compassion. And what it was kind of striking me, like empathy is like we can feel someone else's feeling, an empath, right? We can resonate because I'm feeling what you're feeling, right? So this makes sense. Sympathy, it's more because I can relate to what you're going through. Either I've gone through it myself or I've watched others, I've watched the process. I can relate. I really understand this. With compassion, we may not necessarily be asking to show up with compassion for something we understand at all. We might not have any understanding of the thing that we need to be compassionate towards, right? And it just really struck me why compassion is so different, and that's why it is for me. We may not have felt it. We may not have be able to relate to this suffering that someone else is going through. We're just showing up lovingly, right, for them. And that's really powerful for me to reflect on.
Agreed. Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's really struck a lot of different awarenesses within me. So I'm really grateful to kind of consider, you know, compassion and forgiveness. And at the end of the day, because I do feel forgiveness is an action, and I do feel that compassion is an action, and it makes me feel like these are actions of love. That's really, to me, what is so beautiful, is that these are elements of that unsuspected, unconditional, all-consuming love that exists as a spark within each one of us, which is that unity consciousness. And that's what I feel most strongly from this conversation.
Thank you. Well, Leela, Ashley, Megan, Kay, thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences with compassion and forgiveness. And this concludes our panel discussion on Facebook Live. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. Good night.